Things have wiggled around a little bit since then, but by and large, we're currently very close to those all-time lows. If you look at page 2 of my handout, the goal is to illustrate the refinancing of the 2016 bonds to achieve the highest overall net savings to the district. Said bonds are callable February 15th of 2022, which sounds really far away, but it's time to start preparing and planning for that if you'd like to proceed. There's about 9.9 million outstanding on that issue, and the final maturity is and will continue to be August 15th of 2035. And that has an average interest rate of about 2.96%, so a pretty low rate to begin with. You may recall me in the past talking about bank qualified calendar year limits of $10 million. So we would propose this issue continue it to enjoy its bank qualified status. It was originally bank qualified and it can continue to be bank qualified under this refinancing plan. And that gets you the lowest possible interest rate and the shortest possible call feature. We would also use the dual track process, which we've used on your last several issues, whereby we do a competitive bank loan RFP. We take the best bank loan proposal, boil it down to true interest cost, and then compare the bank loan true interest cost to the bond issue true interest cost. And whichever produces the best economic answer is what I'll ultimately recommend that you undertake. And then just a reminder in this last section, this 2016 issue was new money back in 2016. And, you had reasonable expectations at the time that you would meet this 3-pronged test. The IRS doesn't let us borrow money just because interest rates are low. You have to have reasonable expectations that you can spend 85% within 3 years, incur within 6 months a substantial binding obligation to spend at least 5% of the proceeds, and then to proceed with due diligence on your project. And you still have, from this original 2016 issue, about $5.7 million left of unspent proceeds, which in technical jargon is called transferred proceeds. And what that means is at the time of refunding, at the time of settlement, that those unspent proceeds will be yield restricted at the new arbitrage yield on the new refunding issue at that time, meaning you're not allowed to earn more, even if you could, which we all know investment rates are also at all-time lows. You're not allowed to earn more and keep it if you were able to earn more than the new arbitrage yield on the new refunding bond. So I just caveat that's the one slight difference compared to your other past refundings, where you may not have had unspent proceeds left over. If you look at the next page, you'll see your debt summary. And as always, the top half of the page is your gross debt service, meaning principal and interest on your various issues. Again, tonight we're talking about the series of 2016, which is highlighted in yellow. And the bottom half, as always, is your local share after you receive state reimbursement on that first issue. We monitor your portfolio at all times for refunding opportunities such as this one. And then finally, the important page 4, summarizes most of the rest of the pages. And what you can see on this page is if we were to refund the 2016 bonds, we can settle as early as November 2021 because we're allowed to have up to a 90-day escrow. And we would keep the size under 10 million. And the good news is this is a pretty healthy refinancing opportunity because of those all-time low rates. So we conservatively estimate the net local effort savings to be a little over $500,000, or about 5.27% of refunded par. Remember, the historic benchmark is to save at least 2% of refunded par. So you can see this is pretty healthy at 5.27% net savings. And then down below in column 6, you can see how we might structure these savings. So we can structure that $500,000 with about $99,000, rounding up slightly, in the current fiscal year, about $73,000 in net savings next year, ending 2023, and then about an equal increment, I'll call it $27,000 a year on average for the remaining years, and then it tapers off a little bit in the final year. As always, we're proposing to keep the final payment exactly the same as it originally was. We're not extending the debt at all, but that's how those savings could be structured and recognized. Again, totaling about $506,000. If you look at the next page, you will see a sample motion for if and when you're ready to authorize the finance team to proceed and get the paperwork in order. As always, the finance team consists of myself as your independent financial advisor, Dinsmore and Scholl as your bond counsel, and of course your local solicitor would be involved as well to refund the 2016 bonds via that dual track process that I described to you between a bank loan and a bond issue. And we're suggesting that you set that minimum savings target at that 2% benchmark, which is roughly $200,000. And that's just a floor. That's just a minimum. You may recall this conversation on prior refundings. You know, it's my job to save you every dollar that I can, but we have to set a floor, because if we get below $200,000, we would just hit pause and we would not execute the transaction until we could at least deliver that minimum threshold. The sample timeline is at the bottom of that page. Tonight's an initial presentation. The earliest that you could authorize the finance team to proceed with the motion above would be your September 13th voting meeting. You'll notice it says or later after most of these dates, because this is kind of the fastest that you could move. You can always move more slowly if you so choose. If you authorize the above motion on September 13th, we would be back with said paperwork in order by your October 11th voting meeting. And then settlement could be as early as November 17th, which fits within that 90-day escrow rule that I mentioned earlier. To quickly walk through the mechanics of how this would work, on page 7, you'll see all of your 2016 bonds. So if you do nothing, you'll continue to make the payments on this page. And you can see in column 3, the rates you currently have locked in range from a 2.5% on the short end to a 3.25% on the long end. Page 8 is the portion that we would refund with this transaction. So it's the long end of the issue where the rates are the highest. Page 9 is the small portion that may remain outstanding. Again, we want to keep the size of the issue under 10 million, so we might not quite refund all the bonds. Depends on the winning bid that we receive, what we'll be able to refund. Page 10 is that very short escrow. Again, the call date is February 15th of 2022. So you can see how much money we would need to pay off the refunded portion, principal and interest. So in my example, because investment rates are so low, remember I talked about those unspent proceeds on the 2016 bonds. In this example, you would be locked in at about a 2.41%. And again, that's conservative this early on in the process. But
Jamie, that we don't reset the clock, do we, on those conditions, do we? Since we're
no,
refinancing.
No, they're original to your 2016 settlement date.
We can't borrow any more, can we? We could. I know we go up to 10 million, but you're saying to be qualified, we can't borrow an extra million.
Not at the same time. But if you had new money needs, and I know we had this conversation earlier this calendar year, if you had new money needs and you had identified a project or projects that, you know, allow you to meet those reasonable expectation tests on that new money, you know, first of all, you'll have a clean slate here shortly in calendar year 22, and you know, only a small portion of the last refunding and a small portion of this refunding will count against your 2021 calendar year limit, because we're going to meet certain exceptions that are available through refundings only. You know, 100% of new money always counts against your limit, but we can meet some exceptions on refundings usually. So, you know, if you needed another $1 million and you met all the tests, you could have a sale for that as soon as 15 days after this refunding and still have both BBQ.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
Well, and Jamie, this is Chris. At some point, I'd like to, you know, segue on that topic when you're finished or whenever it's convenient.
Sure. I'll wrap this up quickly and we can circle right back to that. That's okay.
Chris, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Chris Brewer from Dinsmore and Scholl. I serve as the district's bond counsel.
Chris who?
Brewer.
Brewer. Okay, thank you.
So just to
Jamie.
wrap this up quickly on, I'm sorry.
Jamie, this is Walter Schroth. I had a question back on page 4.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Traditionally, the district, as you are well aware, has a local effort in the 3.2 to 3.5 million range,
Mm-hmm.
and in 2028 it begins to drop down significantly.
Yes.
So my question is, what you're showing on the refinance is a 15-year payback period.
Correct.
Could we, or what would it look like if we were to refinance it, but do it in a 10-year period? And just in a rough guess, looking at the numbers, that would maintain that approximate $3.5 million annual payment, and we would eliminate the last 5 years. We'd still be in increments of 5 years for potential callable again. And so is that something we could certainly consider?
Sure, you could consider that. The reason I left the refunding structure the same as it originally was in 2016 is because, this was originally designed to be one step in a bigger financing project at that point in time. So we purposely left these drop-offs that began in 2028 because at the time there were going to be other bonds layered on top of them to kind of fill in those gaps. The reason I didn't shorten it up in this scenario is to provide you that future flexibility if you have capital improvement needs out in the future, preserving those drop-offs for other potential future borrowings can be advantageous. And the other reason is back to my interest rate chart. When interest rates are at all-time lows and that yield curve is so flat, there's never a better time than to keep financings, the same or sometimes even longer, as opposed to shortening up, because you're not really paying up for it, if you know what I mean, because of that flat yield curve.
Well, it was never better than last December. I mean, this is not as good. Chris, Mr. Attorney Brewer, you were going to say something?
Well, yeah, at some point I just need to make a few comments or ask the board some questions about the $5.7 million of proceeds that still remain from 2016.
Go ahead.
Jamie did a very nice job reciting to you what is the basic rule in the law, which is that if you want to issue debt on a tax-exempt basis, you've got to have a need and a purpose. And the IRS measures that by this 3-pronged test of reasonable expectations and project and anticipated expenditure cycles and schedules and so forth. The way the rule is constructed, if you have reasonable expectations at issuance, those generally stay in place, assuming though that you've been diligent. And so when we have transactions and clients transactions that sort of move off track or move to a different course, we look to see sort of how we're proceeding and if we are still proceeding in a certain direction. The IRS of course, has always written these rules and has brought enforcement actions because what they are trying to prohibit is for you to have the opportunity to make money on the money. Because until these last 10 years or so of market experience where rates are where they are, we used to see situations where if you borrowed on a tax-exempt basis at, say, 3%, you could turn around and invest it at 4 or 5 and make money on those proceeds. The IRS felt that was a double dip, that they were both affording you the opportunity of a lower cost borrowing, and as a non-tax-paying entity, you were making money on that money. So sort of 2 times the IRS felt they couldn't get the chance of tax. The good news for you with the $5.7 million that's still sitting in your coffers is that you've not made an arbitrage. When I say that's good news, it's bad from a financial side, good from a legal side, because you've not been able to go out and make some money on this. So there isn't a lot for the IRS to complain about. However, the IRS also has a more generic rule that you're not supposed to issue bonds any sooner than necessary to accomplish a governmental purpose, nor leave them outstanding longer than necessary to achieve that purpose. So as we look at this refunding, Jamie's had the chance to give you the good news tonight, which is you got a savings. I'm the guy who has to give you the bad news. Is we have to think a little bit about that 5.7 million. If you've got new projects and new uses and purposes and you're going to move along to them, then we can just proceed as her outline suggests. If you don't, or if you have a need for, or if you're thinking about additional new funds, certainly it's a great time to borrow, but we're going to have some real demonstration of what the project needs are. It's my job to protect the district by not affording the IRS an opportunity to audit and criticize a transaction and come back to you for a penalty. They of course at the IRS have done this in the past. We've certainly seen random audits. They're not quite as active and vigilant these days, simply because they know that they're not policing against those investment returns that we used to see. But I have to put a note of caution into the air tonight.
Thank you. Counselor, I don't know that we're too concerned about that right now, because we're going through a whole exercise in our elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a definite intent. In fact, we've been wrestling with this for a few years. So I don't think the IRS would get too upset with us, but we should be coming to a conclusion here pretty shortly. So for me, it's not a huge problem.
I am aware. I don't mean to imply at all that this was some kind of negligence on your part. I'm aware that getting the right project, and I mean, I worked as your bond counsel on all these transactions, so I am aware of some of the history. But it's also my duty to just kind of remind you of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to open it up now for any questions. First from the committee.
Could I make one last comment?
Yeah, briefly.
Just so you understand the sensitivity of this savings number, if interest rates move 0.1% up or down, it moves your bottom line savings by $88,000. So it doesn't take a whole lot, to make the opportunity decrease, but it also doesn't take a whole lot to make the opportunity an even bigger home run.
Jamie, we're well aware. Tell you, we're well aware.
Yeah, thanks. This is Terry Kerr. Two comments. One is following up on Walter's. That's a good idea. I think we ought to look at it, but knowing no matter what we do with the grade configuration, we're going to have to spend money on Eisenhower. So we'll have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, Terry, I was just trying to get us out of debt sooner.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain sense on the board that we would like to see being out of debt so we can go more on a cash basis sooner than later.
And I agree with that. And my motto is, best debt's no debt. My second comment is with Mr. Brewer's. I'm not sure if you're aware, we did have a fire in one of our elementary schools. So again, I'll just say that no matter what we do with the grade configuration, we have to put that school back online because it's not. So we're going to be spending possibly millions of dollars just getting that back online. Thanks.
I was aware of that. I wasn't sure what your plan was. And again, I don't mean to be the heavy in this conversation, but I just want us to be attentive to the need. If Jerry gets a call tomorrow from the IRS, I want him to have the answer that we can all live with.
We're going to call you. Okay. Cinda, hold on. Tom.
Yeah, part of our capital list is multiple millions also. So things across the district that we have on that list is what, $2-3 million by itself without trying too hard. So even if we don't do anything, we still have that list that we're trying to accomplish.
And that's all good stuff. I'm glad to hear. That's good.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else have a question? So we need to get back to Jared. You're going to be in touch. How are you going to handle this, I guess, moving forward?
Well, the plan, as Jamie presented, would be at the September 13th board meeting for the board to authorize them to proceed with actually advertising to accept bids or for the actual refinancing itself. So.
Yeah, if you'd like me to jump in, I think Jamie's suggestion is that on September 13th, when you authorize her, her dual track process is that she is going to advertise for bids from the banks, see what those look like, and then that will be our decision-making tree to know if we're going with a bank loan that looks great, and she can give you those results, or we don't think the banks have come in as we'd like, and we think the bond market's stronger, and we move to the bond option. Either way, though, I think you're authorizing debt on that October 11 meeting or so. Then we would settle November 17 or so, and that is the earliest date legally we can deliver tax-exempt bonds for this purpose. And the advantage of Jamie's proactivity here and Jared's proactivity is that, again, with that sensitivity in the market, we are ready to get this done for you as early as we could. If we see a bad market or feel it could get better, we can always back off a little bit. What we don't want to do is waste opportunities. We don't want to wake up in January and realize we've missed an opportunity.
Right. Okay.
Do you have to know, Jamie, by the 13th whether the board wants to shorten that debt or leave it as is?
That would be helpful to know that, because that's gonna, I have to describe this in the RFP to the banks, so they have to know what they're bidding on. Yes.
Can you provide us an example both ways of what you might think that is, or?
Sure.
Okay.
And then if we were to borrow more money, what would you say the rule was, 15 days?
Yes, it must be separated by at least 15 days.
So when would we have to be talking to you about that? I'm not saying we're going to do it, but I like the option.
Whenever
talk to
you're
you about
ready, I'm ready to start talking and
But you-
working through that.
But you need to know by the 13th on this, and then we could be conceivably a couple of weeks later.
Correct. That can be a separate decision because it would not be directly part of this issue.
And if I might, again, sorry not to interrupt, we would need 15 days separation to keep these different issues for tax law purposes. But Jamie, we're going to want to deliver an additional financing if we should do it in 2022.
Why?
Well, I think we can meet the exceptions on the refunding so that just a small portion counts. But yeah, 2022 is right around the corner. I mean, this one's settling November 17th at the earliest. So, it's only another month and a half till 2022.
And I say that only because I assume you want the fresh $10 million opportunity.
Not necessarily.
And you're saying you might be able to structure this as deemed designated and work that way. And that's fine. I understand. I wasn't sure you're thinking. I got it.
The idea of waiting till January the 1st, 2022 would give you another 10 million of bank qualified. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, but we can actually grandfather some of this refunding. I just haven't seen the detailed numbers from Jamie. I wasn't sure what her plan was on the structure.
We can. I didn't think they were talking about more than potentially.
But the guaranteed, or the bank guaranteed, does not have to be 10 million. It could be 2 million, 3 million.
Correct.
1 million, 5 million, whatever.
Less than. It has to be less than 10 million.
Once we get past January of 2022. Is that correct?
You get a $10 million opportunity every calendar year. So it's just the same as your deductions on your 1040 every year when you file taxes. You get a fresh start. There are, though, some grandfathering rules, and depending on the technical structure, and we'd have to see the numbers from PFM on a refunding, we might grandfather it or grandfather a large portion of it, so that if time became very critical and you were trying to hurry these along, it's not impossible to issue more than 10 million in a year and have it all bank qualified, but it has to be separated into two issues. It has to meet certain technical requirements on weighted average maturities and other things. And so given that we're so close to year end, we're probably going to fall into 2022. I'm sorry.
What's the second one, the weighted maturities, and what's the other one?
The refunding debt can be grandfathered up to the amount of bonds that you are refunding, as long as the life of that issue is not more than 30 years from the original new money, which it's not going to be. It's going to be shorter than that. And as long as the weighted average maturity of the refunding debt is not in excess of the weighted average maturity of the debt you are refunding.
Okay.
The idea there is they'll let you slide into the shoes and they'll allow you this grandfathering exception so long as you've not extended or enlarged anything. So sometimes we get more than 10 million done in a year as bank qualified in 2 different or 3 different issues, but each one along the way has to meet each one of these technical tests. For which,
Chris,
yes, sir.
Chris, I don't want to mislead here either. I think what we're trying to, and we don't know exactly what the scope of the project's finally going to be once we figure out the grade configuration and to what level we're going to do Eisenhower and all of that. And I think what we're actually trying to figure out at this point is just what options could potentially be available should we need some extra cash to do what needs to be done. I think everybody on the board here has got their fingers crossed that we can do this all with the cash that we have on hand. And but at the same time, we're just trying to make sure that we do have sufficient funding to do what needs to be done.
Thank you, and I understand, and I'm not trying to presume anything nor lead you to anything. I'm trying to just lay out your options. We do have several. What's always best is tell us what you'd like to do, and then we'll see if we can make it work.
Well, I like to know what our options are. So you've been helpful outlining those options. Unless Jared, unless you have something else, we need to move on.
I'll work with Jamie to get you 2 options for what it could look like if you leave the debt as is or shorten it, and we will have something for September 13th to proceed.
It's like the budget reconciliation bills where you get more than one in a year. So. All right, thanks very much. I appreciate your time. That was informative. Thank you.
It's
Thank
our
you.
pleasure. Thank you very much.
All righty. You're welcome to stay, but 2 things. Kristen Rumbaugh's here as a guest tonight. She's interested in the Finance Committee, and she's introduced herself to me, and I asked her to come and see what she thinks, and if she likes it. You're employed at S&T Bank. Is that my understanding? Yeah. And what's your position?
I am Director of Mortgage and Consumer Operations.
Okay, that's a tough job. That's a lot of detail work. And we have with us Borough Council Member Ben Ford, who's heading up this exploration into LERTA. So Ben, if you want to tell us what you'd like us to know, I'd appreciate it.
Put the handout right there. Just want to pass it on. You can use the mic there. Thanks. So I'm Ben Ford. I think I know most of you guys, but I'm from Indiana Borough Council. I chair the Community Development Committee, and I just actually Kristen was a big help when Indiana Borough was doing the Inhabit Indiana program with sort of loan packages and rebates. So it's good to see you again. Yeah. This I'll keep this as brief as I can. I came and spoke to this committee in February of this year, and about this program called LERTA, which is the Local Economic Revitalization Tax Assistance Program. And you guys had some questions, and so I wanted to get answers for you and then cycle back in the hopes that we can move this forward. Just a very brief review of what LERTA is, because you guys have a lot that comes across your desks. LERTA is enshrined in the Commonwealth law from 1977. And what it is an abatement on the improved value of a property. So if there's a parking lot that is worth $10 a month in taxes, and someone uses LERTA to improve that parking lot, and it's now worth $100 a month in taxes, you still get the $10 a month in taxes. The difference of $90, which usually steps down over time, is an advantage to the developer, which would incentivize them to develop that parking lot into something that's useful and pretty, and eventually will then pay you taxes. So that at the end of the LERTA period, which can be anything up to 10 years, you would then have a value of $100 being paid by that parking lot. So it freezes your tax income for whatever properties are covered for the period of the LERTA, with the idea that at the end of that, people have made decisions to improve these properties in a way that increases your tax base moving forward. So it's an opportunity to sort of incentivize growth, to grow the region really out of some of our funding issues and our tax base issues that all of the bodies are struggling with. So with that in mind, the other part of it that the taxing bodies control the geographic scope of the LERTA, so you can define the size of it. The borough is advocating for the borough, but once if you guys like this, you could apply it to other places. If you feel the borough is too expansive, we can talk about contracting. Similarly, the abatement schedule, so basically the percent on the new value that is paid every year is totally up for discussion. So like I've got a proposed example in here that has it basically at 100% for the first 5 years and then stepping down after that. If ISD feels that's too aggressive, we can change that. Other places do it just for 5 years. Some places do it for 10, but they start the step down in the first year or after the first year. So there's flexibility there to make it more or less aggressive. And when I say aggressive, it's really benefit to the developer to incentivize more growth. That's all things that the taxing bodies, hopefully in concert, could agree upon. Okay. Questions about those basic aspects of it?
Ben, have you gotten any feedback from the county?
Yeah. So we talked to the county early on with this, both to the commissioners as well as to Byron. And they are generally positive about it. Byron's a big fan of these things, and the commissioners felt that it was something that they would like to explore. The other municipalities within the county are looking at it. They haven't done it yet, but there are other places in the county that are sort of beginning to look at it.
Because White Township doesn't have any property tax other than the school district.
Right.
So it wouldn't be a great incentive for them to kind of support this because they don't get any.
But it's also not a disincentive. They don't lose anything either.
Correct.
It'd be interesting to talk to the whole Indiana district, whole geographical part of Armstrong and Chalk that might get further around. On your step down, I've been involved in these in other localities, and the problem with doing it in less than 5 years takes a few years, 3 years to get a project up and fully occupied, functioning. 5-year project, it's not even worth the trouble. Having this kind of aggressive, what I call aggressive, 5 years at zero, that gives the developer a chance to make a big difference. And what it does for a developer is it taxes a cash deal. So when you're paying a real estate tax on a $10 million project and you're making out of cash and you're pulling it out of your pocket, that's a big deal. When the project's up and operating and you have a cash flow, then it's not that big a deal. So this is what this is designed for, and it's designed to encourage developers to look at the area. And I certainly wouldn't make it any smaller than the borough. The borough, you only 4 square miles to begin with. Right. I would encourage the board to look at inviting our other partners into casting that wire. This would affect both commercial and residential, and it would affect existing buildings and new. We don't stand to lose any taxes, any current taxes. What we're doing is waiving off taxes that we don't have.
So that's the key. We're not waiving current taxes.
Right. Yeah. So you would not see under LERTA, you would not see a reduction in your tax income because of LERTA. But for any project that was improved under it for 5 years, you would also not see an increase. After 5 years, you would start to see an increase. And so I think 2 points. Thank you for Tom. That's really helpful. Point one is that basically what you're looking for is people to do projects that they wouldn't otherwise do. Because if they were going to do it anyways, then you're better off getting their money. But if they're sort of on the fence, this is the kind of thing that pushes them over the fence. And to Walter's point, what I'm proposing, what the borough is proposing, is just to do alerta for the borough and to have only the borough taxes coming to school board, only the borough taxes coming, borough residents, taxes coming to the county, and also, of course, those coming to the borough, to be affected by this. As Tom said, if you wanted to look more broadly, you're welcome to do that, but that is way outside of what I care about. And so that's
It's outside your jurisdiction
it
too.
very much so. Yeah.
So you're putting the borough on the table right
Yes,
now and asking
that's what
us
it's all
for that section of our district.
Right.
Okay. You had another handout. Was that of any, you had another one that you sent to the board?
So I sent you guys a spreadsheet that it doesn't make any sense to pass around because it's a workbook basically. Because I know some of you really like to play with the numbers, and that's an opportunity for you to put in different values that you could then see what the effects would be. So I give you the example here of just using the average borough property, average house property in the borough, and making a $25,000 improvement. And then you sort of work it out for you for the school board's taxes. And then I also have the example that's embedded there that we scaled it to $1 million, what it looks like. But there's a lot of space in between. And so you have that example, and I'm happy to talk through that. But the other things that you guys asked about were, there was a couple of questions about logistics. And so we've talked to the tax collector, and he sees no issues with this. The logistics are very doable from his perspective. And there was a question about sort of how would this be managed, and if it was, because the borough is what's driving this, and we're looking at doing it within the borough. Our code enforcement folks can basically do the enrollment in this and sort of notify the tax collector of any of the changes as part of when somebody gets a permit to do a renovation or a new construction. That would be we could trigger it through that. So the borough could handle logistics for everybody basically on that. Yeah.
Roof replacement, a window replacement, it doesn't actually increase the value of the property, the maintenance.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be effective.
So
If I'm putting an addition on my building, increasing the value of my building, that's.
yeah, we'd have to work around. I mean, yes, that would be for me to work around. We use the $10,000 floor to kind of get at things that would improve the overall value. But I think we could make some tweaks to this.
Have you priced a roof lately?
Right. So I mean, so there's some. What I guess what I'm getting at is there's some nuance that I think you guys would have, as well as the county would have, that what I would be interested in seeing is if it's something that's interest to the school board, that you could basically, there's a required public meeting that where the actual, all of the details are pounded out by all three groups in a very open setting. And that would be the place to define those things. Because I mean, the difference between what, something that increases the value and doesn't increase the value is definitely worth looking at, but it doesn't change the overall question of, are you willing to do this?
Terry.
Yeah. With the scenario we're in now with the housing prices spiked, if a property sells, say they do improvements to it right prior to selling it, then they sell it. Can that assessed value go up based on that sale, exclusive of the improvements?
I'm not following that last one.
Say you own a home,
Yeah.
you put $25,000 worth of improvement in it.
Mhm.
The assessed value was $200,000. You sell it for $400,000.
I don't have a definite answer on that for you. So in general, this is set up for commercial and industrial.
Well,
properties.
it would relate to commercial too, I guess.
Yeah.
So my
and
question.
Usually it's transferable. The Roberta is transferable with the property. Because again, that would incentivize someone to make the improvement, and then that's part of their
But Ben, I think what Terry's getting at is how do you separate the $25,000 improvement out of the 200,000 capital gain that
From
you
the
had on
market
it?
conditions.
And so do I get the full $200,000 on the LERTA if I'm the new owner, okay, versus the $25,000?
Yeah, I think that would be something we'd want to enshrine in the law itself. The examples I've looked at do not deal with that at all.
Yeah.
But again, that's a relatively easy thing to put in that comes with it.
That's interesting. I know somebody would know.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely get the answers for you. I mean, basically, I don't know what I don't know, and I'm never quite sure when I talk to folks what they're going to ask me. But we can definitely look into that. But in most places, as I understand it, if the value becomes locked, basically, and then it begins to step down. But whether or not it steps down at 400 or 125 or 225, for example, that I don't know for sure. The other thing you guys asked about though was other communities that have done this, and so borough staff reached out to Altoona, McKean Township, Reading, State College, Burke County, Erie, Warren, Mountjoy, and Scranton. We didn't hear back from Erie, Warren, Mountjoy, or Scranton, but we heard back from the rest of them. There's nobody who's gotten rid of Alerta. So let me just be clear about this up front. None of them, we had no examples, because somebody, I think Cindy, you might have asked about, like, is there an example of someone who got rid of it and why they get rid of it? No one's gotten rid of it. So everyone seems to be keeping them. Everyone we talked to were positive about it. So Altoona, McKean Township, Reading, and Berks County all liked theirs. For example, McKean Township said the program is worth it and it's good for the community. Reading noted the developers really like it. Altoona, Berks, McKean, and Reading also noted that it was used mostly for commercial. Reading and McKean pointed out that they saw development that would not have otherwise happened. So to that question about, are you getting a bonus? The only one that was sort of equivocating is State College. And there's two reasons for that. They're new to it. They've been about a year and a half in, and their school board did not approve it. And so they're seeing very limited use of it, because just like here, their school board is the major taxing body. It represents 2/3 or so of the taxes. So they were the only ones that were sort of like, meh, we're not going to get rid of it, but we're not in love with it. Everybody else was like, yeah, this has been good for us. So most of the responses were pretty much qualitative. Berks did have data. And so Berks has done 36 projects since 2009. Again, this is a county, this is not a municipality. They had the best data from 2015 to the present. In that range, they've done projects as little as $12,000 up to $38.8 million, the average being $11.7 million. They do about 2 to 4 projects a year in the county, just to give you sort of an idea of sort of the scope of this. Yeah, Tom.
I was involved in Warren. The developer I was involved with probably did $10 million worth of work.
Mhm.
It generated, outside of that developer, there was probably another $5 million done. Rejuvenated the waterfront, converted an abandoned industrial building into a brewery, a fitness center, a fishing place, an outfitter. It changed the face of the town. And Warren, I think, is about 8,000 people or so. So the effect there was phenomenal. And one of the reasons that the developer stayed was because it was a 10-year process, and he could get into the LERTA. They did affordable housing, they did market rate housing, they did mixed use. There was banks involved, parking. It was quite an event.
Okay, thank you. Cinda, do you have any questions? No.
We have another meeting at 6:30.
Well, and we're going to go around the room. So you have any further questions? Ben, I'm sorry, you can make a closing comment, but we're going to move on.
Is there anyone else?
The only thing, Madam Vice President, that I would like to add is I think the tax assessment office needs to be a big part of this conversation, because it may be one thing for the tax collector to, collect the bills. The tax assessment office, in my opinion, is really going to be the ones who have to manage the program on when, because they're the ones who print the bills, they're the ones who manage the bills. So it comes back on. They have to have a system in place to change the bills as the LERTA goes away. So I think they need to be part of the conversation.
That's a good point. Thank you. So yeah, just in closing, basically the details can be discussed. And again, there's legally required to be a meeting to move this forward between IASD, the borough, and the county, during which the aggressiveness of it can be figured out, the scope of it can be figured out, all of the details that we would want to have enshrined in the various, because each group would have to do their own legislation, depends on how you do it in your particular taxing body. But the ideal would be to have them all be the same, because when we look at these across the state, the ones where all the taxing bodies are singing the same song, those are the ones that are successful, because it's easiest for the developer. And I appreciate Tom's point. It's captured here a little bit in the summary that, in addition to the increasing the tax base, if somebody does $1 million project, that's $1 million of jobs in a community. That's $1 million of a better looking community. So there's a huge benefit beyond just the taxes. The next steps, if you guys want to pursue this, would be this meeting of the three taxing bodies. It would be a public meeting. We'd have to schedule it way out to discuss the details and do it. But I think well, I need a nod from school board, basically, because the county has given us a nod, the borough has given us a nod. The school board, again, as the biggest taxing entity, without you guys, it's not really worthwhile to a developer. I'll be honest with you. I can't see a developer caring.
So let's just take this is very informal. It's just so we get some ideas. Anybody in the room terribly opposed to it? Like, no way. Is there anybody that's totally over the top wants it? Tom, is there anybody else kind of in the middle?
I'd like an answer to my question.
All right, so you're on reserve until we get an answer. Okay, so you could get back and then Terry can report back.
Yeah, if you know someone who can answer.
The devil's in the details, Julie.
I know, but tonight we're not going to get the details.
No, correct. So continuing the conversation till you get the details figured out is certainly something.
So what I need is that I need to know what details you guys need. Like I got Terry's. I think I can get an answer to that. What other details? Because I don't want to keep coming back and wasting your time.
I think it would be helpful if we could sit down preliminarily before there's a public meeting with them. If we could have Jared sit down with the borough's counter, or you and the town, whoever all you're talking to.
Okay.
And so that he can start to get a feel for not just the logistics, but who's thinking what, because every entity has a different set of issues. We've got we're a big taxing body for the biggest part of our district. So consider that. And then Jared can report back. We'll put it back on the agenda, probably at the September or October meeting. Would that be okay? All right. Okay. Anybody else on this alert?
I was just in Warren last weekend, and I wondered how everything looks so nice. Seriously, it's a nice town.
Yeah, it's a nice town. I thought Evansburg had done some work because boy, they fixed that Main Street up.
I can look into it. I don't know.
I know Greensboro. In fact, that's who I was going to say. Your old friend Jeff.
Regs, yeah.
Yeah, he might, because their counsel's good at this, their legal counsel, and you could save yourself some legal fees and have Jeff.
Sounds good. Right. I appreciate everybody's time, and I got to get a kid to
we got a bunch
a lesson.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate it. I know you've done a lot of work on it.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys considering it.
Thanks,
Thanks, Ben.
2020, Jared, 2020, 2021 year-end closeout update, please.
Yes, ma'am. And in respect for the time that we have remaining here tonight, I won't go into great detail on that. It is attached to the agenda. You also have copies in front of you. But I did want to share briefly where we're looking to close the 2021 year. We are looking right now, and these numbers are not finalized, but a surplus right now about $1.3 million. And I'm not going to go into the details of how that all came out because we will talk more about that. We had some preliminary discussions. But the reason why I bring it up tonight is I just wanted to get the board and the committee's idea of when we approved this budget back in 2020, June of 2020, we approved taking the bond payment for the 2016 bonds from the actual bond proceeds themselves, with the idea that if we came to a surplus, as we are looking at right now, that we would switch that back to the general fund instead of using the bond proceeds, which we can do that. And it'll certainly change these numbers because it'll add another $325,000 of expense to the general fund, dropping that down to about $1 million surplus. What I'd like to do, because the bond took a motion on that in May or June of 2020, is the board then needs to make a motion to pay for that bond payment out of the general fund. And I'd like to put that on the September 13th board meeting. My recommendation would be to do that. And it still leaves us money left over once we finalize everything. If the board wishes to, as we've had some conversations, is to transfer additional money then to capital reserve, even after we change that bond, how we pay for that bond payment.
Follow Jared's, assuming you think we have.
Yeah.
I agree. Terry?
I'm good.
Anybody else? Mike? Do you want to chime in on what you?
I agree 100% we talked about it previously. That was our strategy. We thought we were fortunate. It makes no sense for long term.
So
Yep.
you're talking about putting it on September agenda, the first.
Yeah, the next agenda I'll have to authorize us to do that, and then hopefully by the end of September we will have more finalized numbers as we're still booking some revenue and expenditures, and we'll have a better idea of exactly how we're going to end that year, and we can proceed with any other transfer that the board wishes at that time.
From what I can see what you put out there, so we're looking.
Yeah, I mean, yep. It should not. It's going to change a little bit here or there, but it shouldn't change a whole lot from where it stands right now. So.
I will put it on the agenda for tonight's committee report with the more the public. I want you to explain this. So be prepared to talk about number 3 and why you're thinking that.
Yes, ma'am.
Alrighty, thank you. I'm gonna start out number 4, Pam's outstanding report. We're not gonna grandstand about this tonight. We're just gonna get an idea of for the next board meeting of what we think we want to do. All right. So Jared, you've prepared a report entitled Indiana Area School District Delinquent Earned Income Tax Report. So could you give us a synopsis of what you're trying to tell us here?
Yes, ma'am. And this report came directly from PA Municipal Service Company, which used to be the district's EIT tax collector prior to 2012 when the county went to Berkheimer as a whole. What they are reporting here based on the municipalities, the 4 municipalities within our district, is right now what they have outstanding as far as bills to our taxpayers as far as EIT is concerned. And this is not necessarily just the tax amount. This is including everything. Taxes, fees, penalties, interest, anything that can be taxed on there. Totaling, over from 2011 prior, totaling almost $370,000. I want to say, they're always doing collections on that. They probably submit back to us around $10,000 a year total. So this number does not change too much from one year to the next. Yes.
Hold it. Tom, hold it. He's not done yet. Okay, so you're talking 10% kind of return on the debt.
Yeah, they're collecting, like I said, roughly around $10,000 every single year to us, give or take, depending on what they can collect. We don't get we don't get reports broken down to that extent as to.
The person who's doing it must know.
I would say they're probably collecting more from the most, the earliest years, the 2011s, 2010s. I would say 2001 and prior. I don't know how they're collecting any of that. I don't know who has records for 20-some years ago.
For too long, various retention rules of various entities, but I can't imagine that that 77,000 they're hitting that too hard.
No.
Okay. Now, I think what the reason why we put it on the agenda is because there was a comment made at the last board meeting that we would have a motion in which we would essentially forgive the debt prior to a certain year.
Yes, ma'am. We have talked about that prior as well to the last meeting of setting some type of date.
Now, my feeling, and I'll let Terry and then Cinda. My feeling about that is that we ought to, if we're going to do something like that, which sets precedent, and we don't want to give anybody out there the wrong idea that that we ought to do it and craft a policy that Ron Rapak would look at, Mike, and we would set maybe a 5-year rule, something like that right now, so that we're very disciplined about it. I'm not in favor of just wiping out the whole 367. That's not something I'm interested in doing, because I do think personally, I think from after you get past the Great Recession, it seems to me that around 2009, you might have a chance on some of this delinquency. But so I've said what I think about it. I'm not for a blanket amnesty on these folks.
There are some districts right around us that have done like a rolling date to go back a certain period, but every year that date moves forward, at some point, their collections would not be equitable anymore after a certain date. And I can reach out to see what other districts around us are doing.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of a blanket one either, unless somebody proves to me, why I should agree with that. What a reasonable, date is, I don't know. That would be something our solicitor could,
Jared, so
right.
you could work with Ron on that, because the motion, I think, has to be quite clear.
Mhm.
So we don't have people calling in mixed up and but I don't know how many cases this represents, current cases where they're actively collecting. I have no idea.
But it
No,
also,
it's number of taxpayers. Go
this also helps out PA Municipal Service Company, so what are we getting from them if we do
ahead. We could maybe take that.
walk away? Yeah.
Cindy.
So I think I agree with Tom. Definitely agree with Terry. It'd be nice if we would get a report to see what we really have, because this is typical of PA Municipal Services bookkeeping. It's just, and as far as I would say we need to be done with them and gone, because I would say that probably 70% of this at least is what I call bogus tax fines and interest and penalty. They send these delinquent notices to people for absolutely no reason. And I know, because I've received them myself. And I've seen more than just me. I think they prey on senior citizens. They prey on anybody that they think you get a thing in the mail that says you owe $7,000, and people get scared and they try to make a deal, they try to pay it. I think we should just get rid of them.
One quick comment before Tom. Could Berkheimer provide us from 2012 to now what the same data? And I'd like to compare the two then.
Yeah, absolutely. They would have that data.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
I think we've got to, Jared, I think you got to get a feel for really how close she is and what they're doing. I don't know if we can request a copy of their audit reports or not. Pam's gets off.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure. I mean, I can make a request to get a better breakdown of what exactly that amount is.
I mean, we're the real personnel, not Pam's.
No. Additionally, Julia is right. We do need to have this set up as a rolling procedure so that we know how to go in the future, because there's no guarantee that Berkheimer is not going to get lazy and do what Pam's did.
Right. That's
So-
my point.
We need to, take care of this with Pam's, but look to the future too.
Yeah, I mean, the big difference between when Pam's collected and when Berkheimer's collected is employers are now required to withhold EIT, where prior to 2011, employers were not required. It was at will by employers, and most employees paid when they filed their taxes. And that's why this delinquent amount is what it is. It's certainly different now.
All of the delinquent notices and people that I've been involved with have been people that their employers were paying the tax. So that just.
Well, I don't know that we're going to be ready for a September 13th motion, correct? Do you think you can have an answer? But our committee won't even meet until the end of September, absent a special meeting, which I don't know that.
There's no rush.
There's no rush.
Wait till October.
So I think we should plan that you wouldn't put a motion on one way or the other until at least October.
No, it's not until I get a report back to you.
Okay, Tom, you're allowed to go. Go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got fined interest of $425 for overpaying $45. Okay, my PAMs. That's my personal experience. They had not a single piece of paper to prove one way or the other. So if I decided to fight more detailed information. And that's what they do, is they put out a $200 bill, and it's easier for my mother to pay it than to fight it. And that's what they're doing. These bills are 10 years old, at least 10 years old, and they don't have to pay for it. Of $367,000 of this thing that we're owed, okay, that's penalty and interest. More than 70% is penalty and interest, which goes directly to payouts. Okay, so all we're doing.
Is that true? They get all the penalty and interest. We don't get a cut of that?
No, we get at least the interest because that's ours. And there's a piece that they get as part of that.
They charge me penalty and interest on my overpayment.
They did that to me one time. I
I
remember.
mean, they're bookkeeping.
I'm like, that's
In
nice.
front of a magistrate, none of these stand up. And all they're doing is hassling our citizens.
Okay, all right. So,
I'm in favor of forgiving the whole thing. 10 years, there's not a magistrate in Indiana County that's going to find an elderly person who didn't pay the thing.
Well, there's pros and cons on that because you're setting precedent now.
I'm setting, well, no, just in this one. If they can't collect in 10 years,
Yeah, but
That's their
Cinda's
fault.
point is that Berkheimer could get the same way.
And I
So let's
understand that.
just slow it down. So,
Okay.
so
But I don't want to say, I don't want to pretend that we're going to get $400,000 out of this.
we don't, no, but it would be nice to get 50. Okay, but I get it. I understand. I'm not, I agree. I think Pam's has been a disaster. Walter, do you have anything you would like to say about
No.
this? I saw you talking to Mike.
No, we were just commenting how horrendous a $425 fine and interest on a $40 overpayment. I mean,
Well, nobody complains that chewing gum costs 50 cents a pack or more now, and it's,
We're already past our.
right, so let's, but I understand your point, but I want to move on. So, anybody else? One more. Mr. Harley.
No, I'm done, I'm done.
Thank you. Number 5, the new convection, it's 639. The new convection oven for Ben Franklin should not be a long report, Jared, right?
No, there's a motion on the agenda tonight to replace an oven at Ben Franklin. That's halfway not working. It'll be paid for. We got approval from PD to pay for it out of food service with the excess money we have there.
Okay, because they need it, right? They need this and we can afford it.
Yes, if that oven, the other half of it goes down, they will be unable to cook there.
Last year, but the year before. Okay, next, East Pike replacement funding, short report, please. Where are you on that?
Well, I don't have a report on that. That was a discussion we wanted to have. We don't need to have that tonight. It can be taken on later because we're not even to the point of talking about these.
Okay, I also think number 7 is a rolling item.
Yes, ma'am.
So we all know what happened at our last Buildings and Grounds meeting, and I think that our role is when on these 4 options, you all start to come up with some numbers, we're probably going to have something to say about them, correct, Mike?
Absolutely, Madam Vice President. We'll also paste some information on our website so people can go through and access it, similar to what we did with AI when they did the feasibility study.
Anybody else want to say anything about that one? But we do need a new roof.
We do, Madam Vice President. We
So
do.
can't- we're not, Walter, anything?
I'm good.
Okay. Food supply and costs.
Just wanted to give a heads up to the Audit and Finance Committee meeting. We are receiving notices from PDE, the Department of Food and Nutrition, as well as our food service company, just of the potential increase in food costs that could be coming down the line that could affect our food service budget. Delays in getting food in, delays in getting certain product lines in, and just wanted to update and kind of give a heads up to the committee that it's possible.
You might have to do some budget tweaking there on that, because aren't you going to run a deficit at some point in that? What were you telling me recently?
If we have a normal, knock on wood, we have students in place most of the school year, we are projecting a surplus in food service to make a little bit of money. We had a deficit year last year, but we have excess funds to help cover that.
This year end, the one that last ended in June.
We have a potential deficit of around $30,000, which is not bad compared to the year that we had. For the year that we had. So if we have any sort of a normal year this year, we are projecting a possible profit of $50,000. Now, we are part of a big buying program. Hopefully some of that, can be absorbed through the program itself. But just wanted to give a heads up to the Audit and Finance Committee that can be part of the discussion when we close down this year's food service program.
Any questions? So that'll be, you're going to report back to us.
Yes, there'll be more as that comes down the line. We'll.
Anybody? Comment? Mike? Walter? Rob? Okay, good. I'm going to preface the last one, purchase of add-on software. I'll ask, I guess, Mike and Jared to talk about that, but I did approve that for Mike because of the time crush, because I didn't think it was at all out of line and something he needed. So Mike or whomever wants to talk about that.
I'll take this one, Jared. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Dear committee members, as Madam Vice President just spoke, I called her recently about upgrading our PA ETAP software to increase $1,600 to allow us access to differentiated supervision module that is allowed through PA ETAP that we needed for our teachers. This year, we rolled out differentiated supervision as a pathway for evaluation for principals and for teachers. we need access to the software where we house all our evaluation tools. I called Madam Vice President, asked for permission, and she thought it was best to bring it forward to be transparent to the rest of the committee, letting you know that we authorize the cost. It's a minimal cost. It allows us to do our job more effective, more efficiently, and it's a tool we've been using quite regularly over the past several years. So we just want to bring forward and see if there's any questions. If so, I'll address them here this evening.
I think you're good to go. I don't think we need a motion.
Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Now, Kristen, I don't want you to think that all these meetings are insufficient. We have a lot of pressure on us right now. We've got to get the doors open next week, so we've got a lot on our plate tonight. So, do you
Oh.
have
Oh.
Appreciate the end.
I would like to say welcome. I didn't get to meet you, so welcome aboard.
anything for the good of the order? Because we're at close out a little bit early. Tom, do you have something you'd like to talk about? All right, okay.
We're gonna start having some fun here between you two.
I know, really.
Okay, thank you. We stand adjourned.
And then we're gonna go into executive session at this point in time.
Yeah, I wouldn't,
Okay, so